Before we show you our trip to Israel, I just want to say that we couldn't exactly make the trip without a lot of help. So I want to thank Mark and Patty for watching the kids while we were gone. And thank you to others as well who helped us out. Joel took us to the airport. Gary and Kathy picked us up from the airport. And thank you to those that helped out Mark and Patty. You know who you are, because otherwise they might have gone a little more crazy. So we just want to say thank you, first of all, for that. I hope that shows up okay. So we left here at 3 o'clock in the morning on, was it a Monday? Yeah, Monday morning. Flew out of Cedar Rapids to Denver at 5 o'clock, and then we left Denver at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. 10-hour flight to Germany, and then a 4-hour flight to Israel from there. And we did not get to Israel until it was actually Tuesday, about 4 o'clock. There's an 8-hour time difference. They're 8 hours ahead of us. So we were pretty exhausted. So good idea. Okay. That's probably going to be hard to see. Let's see. So first, we landed in what's Tel Aviv, which is not on here. It's a fairly modern city. But we started up around Galilee, and we were up there a few days. We went to Caesarea. We went to Megiddo. Then we went down here. We went to Jericho and Jerusalem. There's a place called En-Gedi, and Masada is down there. When we were around Galilee, we stayed in Tiberias, which is just a town that, I don't know if it was Herod the Great, but some Herod built a city in the name of one of the Caesars, Caesar Tiberius, which you find that a lot. Magdala, Capernaum. We went up to Caesarea Philippi at the top, and we drove by Mount Tabor, drove by Nazareth, Nain, and we went to Scythopolis, which is also Beth Shan. So just a few of the names, but to give you an idea where we were at. This is a picture outside of our hotel room, right on the Sea of Galilee. So that was nice. It wasn't the fanciest hotel, but it will do.
Wait, can I tell about the food really quick?
Sure.
So at the hotels, it's like tourism is big for them. So there's all these groups. And so you go down and there's this massive buffet of veggies and salads. It's delicious food, but they also get the same thing every day. So by day 4 of eating hummus, I was a little tired. But the hotel was really nice. I thought it was really nice.
So after we got there, we just basically went to bed for the night. And then the next morning we woke up and we took a boat ride on the Sea of Galilee in this boat. And as soon as we got going, the captain of the ship, he was a Messianic Jew, but he thought we all needed to sing the national anthem. So he raised a flag and we sang the national anthem. So I guess he thinks
That was super awkward.
Americans must want to do that.
He's like, we're going to raise the flag. But we were with a bunch of military people, so I think it was kind of nice for them, but it was just kind of strange.
Oh yeah, I should say. The group we were with was from my dad's church out in Colorado Springs. So there was about 48 total was a group of people. Both of my parents and then my sister and brother-in-law were also on this trip. Yes.
Yes, they raised the U.S. flag and sing it in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. It's kind of like, thank you.
This region here is the region of the Gadarenes, where Jesus would have drove the demons into pigs, and they ran down into the water. You'll see there's another picture of it. We'll see more later as well. This is where we're about to land at a place called Gennesaret, or Gennesaret, however you say it. And we find this.
So this is a boat. So the Sea of Galilee this year, what is it hasn't happened in how many years did he say? Like
It hasn't
20
been this
years?
high in about 20 years, they say.
So it is the highest it's been in the longest time, so everybody there is super excited. But because it had been so low, there had been beaches, and someone had found this boat in the mud. And because of the water in the mud, it had been so preserved so well that they kind of foamed around it and carried it out and looked at it. They believe it could possibly be from the time of Christ, maybe a fishing boat. They like to, I think, claim that Jesus could have been in this boat, but when you think of Jesus and his 12 disciples, we don't think that 12 people could have fit in this boat.
Yes.
It would have been kind of scary on the sea.
13 people could fit in this boat, but that's about it. So I believe it's probably, dated from that time maybe, but maybe 2 guys fishing in it instead. So here's just some of the countryside around Galilee. Those are banana trees wrapped in this net, which they do to keep the heat in at night. There's a lot of agriculture throughout the country. But just one thing about Galilee, I was just surprised how beautiful it was, just green and lush.
Yeah, we were there in their winter time, which he said is a great time to go because it's green and it's beautiful. You get to see. Otherwise, when you go in the summer, everything's brown. So it was kind of nice when we were there.
This is what came to be known as Tabgha. It wasn't exactly named that at Jesus' time, but this is where they say the feeding of the 5,000 happened. And so there is a church building there. You will come to find out there's a church building on about every place where they claim that Jesus did something. And on the floor.
So you'll see a lot of churches, like he just said, every place we go to, they decided to build a church on top of it, which is kind of like you could have had cool scenery, but they built a church there. So tradition says that this is where the feeding of the 5,000 was. So on the floor tile, there is a basket in the middle. It's kind of hard to see, but it has loaves of bread and then fish on the outside.
This is a place called the Primacy of Peter, which says when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon of John, do you love me more than these?" So this is in John 21. When the disciples catch a whole bunch of fish, they realize it's Jesus on the shore, and then Jesus reinstates Peter. So apparently, I think 7 years ago when my dad went, he said the shoreline was maybe 50 yards back. So that's how much the water has risen. This is the church they built there. Never mind, that wasn't. This is Capernaum. There's tons of things about Capernaum with Jesus. Peter lived here. Jesus would have lived here a lot. To the left is the synagogue. I think you guys have seen some of these pictures already. They went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue and began to teach. And so that's what we did. That was one cool thing. Me and my dad did some kind of team teaching at times. So it's pretty cool to teach in not necessarily the same synagogue, but right in the same place that Jesus taught. So this stuff, they date to the 4th century. The dark stuff is what they date to the time of Jesus. So, interesting note. This is a view on the shoreline of Capernaum. So this is what Jesus would have got to see a lot. It's just beautiful.
We loved Galilee, and so our first couple of days we were exhausted, but Galilee was probably our favorite spot because up there it's really untouched. So, Tiberias is kind of a resort city, but honestly, they've really left most of it alone. So when you're on the sea and you're on the side of the sea, it looks like what Jesus would have seen, which is why I think it was so special. It's so cool. So to just stand on the beach and look out at the ocean and be like, this is where Jesus walked on the water, like that was awesome. Sea, okay, whatever, sea.
This is St. Peter's fish, which is fairly common meal. You just peel the skin off and it comes right off the bone. It's pretty good.
It was delicious.
It might not look the best right there, but it's good. It's kind of hard to see here, but there's the sea right there. We're driving up to Caesarea Philippi right now. The sea is right there. So what's interesting about Caesarea Philippi is just the context of what happens here. Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" So this is in Matthew 16 when Peter confesses Jesus as the Christ. And in the background, you'll see a cave there. There's some engravings into the rocks, but that hillside would have been filled with all these different temples to Greek gods and whatnot. This cave, apparently they would sacrifice a goat, and if it would float or sink...
If it would float, the god didn't accept it, and if it went under, the god accepted it. But this is underwater, so they're like polluting their water system because it's going into their streams and stuff.
So all that just would have been temples and stuff. Maybe they put little figurines there that they worshipped. And then the water that you see is one of the sources of the Jordan River. It just comes out from the ground right there. So, pretty place, at least where the water is.
So this place, like a lot of places in Israel, honestly, you could excavate everywhere and find something. But this place, among other places, there's just people living there, so they can't excavate. So there wasn't a ton there, but what we got to see was pretty cool.
And this is just coming back down. This is going down to the Mount of Beatitudes. They built a church there. So the Sermon on the Mount is what we're talking about. That's Tiberias, where we stayed right there. Gadarenes. Yep, there and to the right is the Gadarenes.
I really liked that, and I was excited about it. I wanted to go there, but there's really not much there, they said. But when you think about the story of Jesus sending the pigs down the cliff and dying, like, you understand how the pigs got crazy because it's just drop-off cliffs. So that was really cool for me to see.
Right there is Capernaum, so just so you know what we're looking at. This is Magdala, towards the end of the day, that day. So Mary Magdalene. This is a stone that they found in the synagogue. You can actually see a menorah carved into it, but I believe they think this is where, when somebody would read a scroll, they would lay it out on this stone. So that's the actual synagogue. There's some neat, you'll see tile work like this through a lot of places actually, but that's some intricate tile work there. This is a picture from our hotel room at night, and you can see across the lake, you can see how things are lit up. So it helps you understand the idea when Jesus said, "You're the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." Well, it's true. Oh, that's hard to see. So this is from Magdala looking up at the Arbel Cliffs, or the Cliffs of Arbel. This is going up to it. What's funny about this video is if we had audio, we would hear my mother right behind me saying, "Okay, Brady, that's close enough. That's close enough."
His mom was a freak out. So everything that we had showed you before this was our first day. So we had a 12-hour days, so it was exhausting, but I mean, well worth it. So the next morning, we didn't have this scheduled, and Brady's dad said, "I really want to do this." So we did have a lot of elderly people, not a lot of elderly people, but they made the hike, so we go up this cliff. It was a gorgeous walk, and then we get to see down the scenery.
Yeah. And so the story of these, we did a teaching on the Transfiguration, which I don't think they think this was a possible spot because, like I said, I think the Gospels say within like a week, they would have had to come from Caesarea Philippi down this way. I mean, it was about 25 miles, so they could have. But anyway, the story of these cliffs, I don't know if this was an actual little cave, but even before Jesus' time and in the Jewish revolt in like 66 AD, people would hide out in these caves. And they actually showed this kind of crane-type mechanism, this big crate, where the Roman soldiers would be lowered down over the cliff, and that's how they finally got to those who were revolting, because they were hanging out on these cliffs. So That's the plain of Gennesaret that we're looking at. So the Sea of Galilee is to the right, which you can see there. There's the sea right there. And then that's looking down at Magdala right there. This is what is behind us. Thought that was pretty. And somewhere right around here, I mean, besides biblical history, there's so much other history, but if you've heard the name Saladin, during the Crusader times, there was a battle that Saladin had won kind of right behind us and to the right, I believe. But this is Mount Tabor, which is another possible site for the Transfiguration. But again, this would probably be like 50 miles from Caesarea Philippi. So within a week, Jesus would have had to, walk that way. But of course, they built a church or a building up on top that supposedly commemorates that. You can also find Mount Tabor in the book of Judges. Deborah said to Barak, "Up, for this is the day in which the Lord has given Sisera into your hand. Does not the Lord go out before you?" So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. This was Nain that we drove by, which Jesus rose the widow's son from the dead at Nain. And then right on the other side of this mountain is Shunem. And if you remember the story of Elisha, he also raised the widow's son. Okay, the next thing is Megiddo. And Megiddo was important because it was along this Via Maris, which is the way of the sea. It was just basically a route that went from Egypt up to Damascus and then to the rest of the ancient Near East. So this is what was the city gate. There's apparently... This is called a tell because there's just mounds and mounds of just...
ruins upon ruins upon ruins.
I think there's like 20-some levels of ruins, they say, at this place. So it was a strategic location, but they're still doing excavations there. This is the valley of Jezreel that it overlooks. You can kind of see some of the layers right here that could still be excavated. This is cool. This is looking at Mount Carmel. Which we'll see in a little bit. But this was just, there's so many just beautiful sites just to kind of go up high and just oversee everything. This is Caesarea, which Herod built, Herod the Great built. So this is part of the aqueduct that, I'm not sure how far it came, but it was leading to Caesarea. It ended right there. But to the right, it was few hundred yards, as far as you could see. So this is the amphitheater there, so you have a great view of the Mediterranean Sea, and they talked about how the wind off the sea would kind of push the sound to the crowd.
So we got to sing there. There was another worship leader on the trip as well as me, and so one of my jobs was to help lead songs, and we roped Brady into singing with us so we could do 3 parts. So somebody took a video of it, but we don't have it.
I took a picture of this because they date this around the 300s. You see the cross there etched into that. So Constantine in the 300s declared, Christianity okay, or I don't know if he was actually the official religion. He at least said it was okay. But so that's kind of significant to see that there. This is the other part of Caesarea. So right there where those pillars are would have been a palace of Herod's.
So we know Herod as being crazy. That's kind of how we think of him, as like, he killed his sons. But over there, Herod is super big because he built so many different places, because he was an amazing architect. Yeah,
so he built Caesarea. He obviously built the temple in Jerusalem. What was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, Masada, which we'll see later. Hard to see there, but it says Tiberius and then Pilate's name. So that stone is not the original. It's an original replica, though. But it says something Tiberius Caesar.
That's our tour guide said, original replica.
Yeah. Pontius Pilate. So obviously we can, that's an important name to remember. So he made some tribute to Tiberius Caesar. This is
This is Herod's palace. Part of it's in the sea. So there's the Mediterranean Sea. It's beautiful. It's blue and green and really pretty.
But Brianna said there's tile work even down in these, apparently. But you can see the tile work there. It's a pretty nice palace. This is the Hippodrome where they would have done horse races. And I was told that the movie Ben-Hur was filmed at this location.
One of them. One of the Ben-Hurs. We don't know which one, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they would have had to come up with a lot of other stuff because a lot of stuff is gone. But anyway. So again, there's the palace. So here we talked about Paul. Then he, Governor Felix, ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace. And you keep reading Paul's story. This is at the end of Acts after he had got arrested in Jerusalem. When 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, but because Felix wanted to grant favor to the Jews, he left Paul in prison. So Paul was hanging out here for 2 years. So that was kind of cool to think about that. This is the chapel on the top of Mount Carmel. Well, somewhere down there is Megiddo. I'm not really sure, but just another beautiful, beautiful sight. I think that's Mount Tabor. It's kind of hard to see, but I really can't see that. So the shiny part that you see, that's the Mediterranean Sea. So when Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel, this is after the prophets of Baal episode, and he bowed himself down to the earth and put his face between his knees. He said to his servant, "Go up now, look toward the sea." And he went up and looked and said, "There is nothing." And he said, "Go again 7 times. And at the 7th time he said, "Behold, a little cloud like a man's hand is rising from the sea." So there you go. There's the view that Elijah had. This is the town of Nazareth. Nazareth, can anything good come from there? Nathanael asked. I would still say no, nothing good can come from there.
So we're kind of going fast because our days were packed, but when you think of the Bible, you're excited to see Nazareth and Bethlehem, and I would never go back to Nazareth again. It's not worth it. It's this really ugly, massive town that has nothing there.
There was a pretty view there, and apparently this is the mountain where they were going to stone Jesus or throw him off the cliff.
Remember, they were mad because Jesus said something, so they put him up to this hill, and then he just walked through them. This is where they say it happened. Yeah. There is a church there called the Church of the Annunciation, which is where they say the angel came to Mary, so they built a church there. But we didn't go there.
That's another view of Mount Tabor. This is a place called Yardenit, just a little south of the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River. It's the baptismal site because the place where like Jesus would have been baptized is actually in Palestinian territory. So I don't even know if it's an actual site.
So they have all these spots along the river for different groups because people go and get baptized. So we did have a number of people go to get baptized there.
And so so this is the mighty Jordan River. And so in the next picture, see if you can even find the river. Anybody see a river there? Okay, right there. Yeah, it's not, the Jordan River is not.
Right, they're like, here's the Jordan River, and you're like, oh, it's like smaller than Bear Creek at some places.
Yeah. Okay, this is Beth Shan or Scythopolis. As far as the ruins there, this is probably one of the best places. But I also saw a picture of when they had excavated it. I think it was around 1990. Like none of those pillars that you see were standing. So they stood those up themselves. And then like on the sides here, these would have been like covered sidewalks down the main drag of the city. So if you're wondering how they moved massive stones, this is one way that they did it. Put 2 wheels on the side, and this is cool. You're kind of wondering what it is. But so apparently there would have been a floor over all these things, and this was the bath. This was the bathhouse. This is where they all would spread their viruses among each other, basically. But so there's just this, basically it's duct work under there, and they would have a furnace outside, and they would send heat underneath the floor, and so you'd have heated baths. So pretty interesting. They're pretty smart. some more intricate tile work. One thing our guide pointed out was this sign right here. He noted that they were swastikas. So, which it's interesting about him. So our guide, he was Jewish, very proud Israeli, but both of his parents had survived the Holocaust. So there's another picture of the main drag of the city. Here's these
These are
shopping
some
center.
shopping quarters. The problem is, all these places are so cool, you could spend the whole day there and you have like 2 hours, maybe, from each place to each place.
There is something up on top of that hill. We did not walk up there. Some of our group did, but this is the amphitheater there. This top part, there were seats there, but they've all crumbled in. And apparently they've rebuilt this part. I mean, it's pretty cool, and because everything was just laying down, I thought I would try and help them. But this is a coliseum there that's also in Beth Shan, a little coliseum. We just drove by, so this is a picture from the bus. So who knows if, Christians were ever fed to the beast there or what. But anyway, this is pictures just on the drive down to Jericho. I think we're in Palestinian territory now, the West Bank. So what you see in the background would be the country of Jordan.
So there was checkpoints, but we never had to stop for any of the buses. And some people are like, was it kind of scary? And it wasn't at all. We never had any issues. Some of these towns are Palestinian, so Jericho is Palestinian.
These were date palms, which is a type of palm tree that they had, always planted in perfect rows. And apparently they need a lot of water, and they need irrigation. So what they do is filter their sewer water, which is interesting. So just very rugged terrain. There's the shepherd out in his field. This is Jericho, and this is the Mount of Temptation, or at least they claim that. So then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Okay, so
they built a church up there.
Yes, there's a couple.
But we didn't go to it. We just looked at it.
But my favorite part, besides this view, so basically right now we are looking opposite of what Moses saw. Moses would have been somewhere over here on the mountains of Nebo, or the Nebo Mountains, and looking at the Promised Land before he died. Here is just part of a tell of Jericho that they're still excavating.
So the ancient city of Jericho, but there's really nothing there.
Yeah, they've never found the mighty walls that have come down. So we're just looking opposite of what Moses would have seen. So God said to Moses, "Go up to the mountain of the Abiram, Mount Nebo, which is in the land of Moab, opposite Jericho, and view the land of Canaan." So right here, it's hard to see, but that's the Dead Sea right there. So there was a camel.
You want to tell them about our lunch?
This is I met a guy named Assam. He was a Palestinian. He was a Christian, and it was just, I guess I can tell you about him later if you really want to know. But it was cool to talk to him. He was had to keep it on the down low. But this is the tree of Zacchaeus.
What they claim is the tree
nobody
Zacchaeus
wanted to get
climbed.
out. Nobody wanted to get out of the bus and stop, which was fine because it's
stopped for 5 seconds and we took a picture and went on.
This is some pictures just on the way to Jerusalem. Here's some Bedouins that still live out on the mountainsides. And there's the first picture of Jerusalem from, I think it's called Mount Scopus, which I don't know what that was, but there's the Dome of the Rock you see. This place was cool. This is a Lego man's paradise. This was just a model of Jerusalem, but it's probably like 20 to 30 yards, wide. So this would be looking from the Mount of Olives, and what you see here is the city of David to the left. This is the Kidron Valley. This is the Valley of Hinnom, or what would be Gehenna. See pictures of that later. But so the city of David, when David conquered Jerusalem, like this little part right here, those walls.
That's it.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy to think about? You think David going in and conquering, and that's how big it is, and they haven't even excavated that.
Yeah. This was Herod's palace, I think, and there was, you can't really see it, but there was like a direct route straight to the temple. This is the Antonia fortress where Pilate would have been. There's a little opening right here. There's a gate and there's some rocks. So that's where they think, that's one place for Golgotha, where Jesus was crucified, which now is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So there you can see there's a gate there. So maybe Jesus came out of here carrying his cross and went right outside the city. Like this part of the city would not have been there at Jesus' time. Here's a little map to give you an idea. So this was where that gate would have been, Golgotha. We went to a place up here, which also is another potential place. But so this spot right here, here's the Temple Mount, Mount of Olives. Here's the two valleys. So here's a present day map. Here's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre right here, which is, we'll get to that later. But
so that place though where that model was is the Israeli museum. So we did get to go in. We couldn't take pictures, but they have the Dead Sea Scrolls housed there. Oh. So later on we get to go see where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, but we did get to see portions of them inside the building.
So the other place we went, which was another option, is this Damascus gate. So it would have been like right outside here, and you'll see those pictures later. This is pictures of not beautiful Jerusalem.
So this wall was built by the Crusaders, correct?
This wall was built by the Turks in 1500s by Suleiman the Great, or the Magnificent. Okay, we're standing on the Mount of Olives right now, looking at the Temple Mount. So again, the city of David is over here. So looking from the temple down to the south to David's city.
So right in front of us, can you go back, babe? Right in front of us is this massive graveyard of all these tombs. It's going down this huge hillside. And you can see it better from the other side, but when it talks about when Jesus was crucified and the tombs broke open and people have rose from the dead, that's kind of what I imagine. You see this massive graveyard right by where Christ was crucified.
This is supposedly the upper room with a very Crusaders touch. This is in Bethlehem, which again, Bethlehem was very disappointing.
It was. So when we went to Bethlehem, we had to have a different guide. Menachem could not lead. It's a rule.
It's in Palestinian territory.
So we had to have a Palestinian guide. And he took us to this cave, which is just an example of what a cave would have been, possibly where Jesus was born, where they would have housed the animals and they would have had room.
There's a shepherd's field.
And this is looking down on a shepherd's field. Yeah.
That they say. This is the Church of the Nativity, which I guess it's the oldest church in the world. When the Persians came in, I think the 500s, there were some markings on the door about the wise men from the Christmas story, and they saw that, and so they did not destroy the church. So that's kind of interesting. But there's like, I don't know how many different groups here, Greek Orthodox, Catholic, and it's,
So it's really interesting. There's like different parts of church. So the one we saw before, it was like the Catholic part, and now here's the Greek Orthodox, and it's just a difference in scenery and design. The Greek Orthodox is very gaudy and elaborate.
It's all gaudy. This is the Dead Sea right there. This is Qumran, which Qumran's very cool. And this is the cave. You may have seen this picture at times, but this is where some of the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. This is cave number 4, and that's a very significant discovery, the Dead Sea Scrolls. In this cave, there's actually 11 caves where they found scrolls and things. But in this cave is where they found 75% of what's contained in them. And so everything that's contained, every book is represented, at least in the Hebrew Bible, so the Old Testament, except the book of Esther. And they date these to the 2nd century, some of them to the 2nd century before Christ. And so before that, the Masoretic text, which is dated in 600 to 900 AD, so that's how big of a discovery the Dead Sea Scrolls were, and there's a lot of stuff you can read on them. And how they discovered them, the story goes, some Bedouin shepherd boy was out looking for his lost sheep. He found this cave and was curious. He threw a rock up into the cave, and he heard these pots break. And I guess the rest is just the history, but that's how they discovered something, because they were contained in these clay jars, clay pots. This is on our way down to Masada, but first we stopped at En-Gedi, and En-Gedi is just very rugged. So it says, Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines. He was told David is in the desert of En-Gedi. This is a story where David goes into the cave and cuts off part of Saul's robe. When you look at the terrain, you realize how crazy Saul was and how insane he was to just keep going after David. There's a little spring right there. And then the Dead Sea is right there. I took a picture of this because this is a little resort on the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea's right here. Well, I think 40 years ago when this was built, the Dead Sea was up here, right on the edge of this resort. So it's receded quite a bit. And this isn't in the same place, but these lines you see here, I don't remember when they said, but that's what the level of the Dead Sea used to be. And behind me, it's probably at least half a mile back. So this is Masada. Herod built this fortress. That was from looking on this side. We're going to take a gondola ride up. All the palaces and stuff are right here. This is the ramp that the Romans built on this side. In the Jewish revolt, the last group to hold out went to Masada. And so the Romans took 2 years to build a ramp up to Masada. And when they got there, all the people had committed suicide. So nobody really won, I guess. Those are all storehouses, though, that you see. So people could have held out there a long time, and they did. You can kind of see this is a wall the Romans were building. You'll see, I guess I didn't point it out earlier, but they put these squares all around, and that's where they think the Roman encampments were, as the Romans just waited them out. So some more tile work. They even stucco things in some of the buildings. This line here, that you'd see that all the way around, but everything below that line was what was still there, and then they rebuilt some of it. Again, there's some more heated baths. This is a giant cistern, which would hold a lot of water. And here you see, they would have had to go down the hill to get water, but what they did is they dumped the water out here, and they must have built some sort of canals, and it would run down into these lower cisterns. So Herod was very smart in how he built it. This is what the layers of palaces would have looked like, and you can kind of see them right here. This is the ramp that Romans built. They think it would have been about 50 feet higher. We decided to walk down, so it was a very windy path. That was kind of cool and a good workout. This is the Dead Sea. Some of them went swimming.
I got to bob in the Dead Sea, and it's really fun. But you have to be really careful because they say don't get in. It's so salty, don't get in your face. You have to back in and then sit down and not try to flip over. It was really fun.
This was our free day in Jerusalem. This is the Jaffa Gate. This is the Tower of David, which I think they just named it that. He didn't build it, but it was a cool structure. Can't get away from Iowa in downtown Jerusalem. Every store that you see was all the same, just shops, blocks and blocks of the same shops. This is the Western Wall, which you had to go through security for that.
There's also a separate men and women's part, and I didn't know that until I was down in the men's part, and I'm looking around like, there are no women here. So nobody yelled at me, and I went back on the other side. And to the right, you'll see all these... there's
a lot of bar mitzvahs going on.
Bar mitzvahs happening, and then there's a wall, and the women are on the other side.
And then that ramp you see goes up to the Dome of the Rock, which when we were there, it was not open. So this is just to the right of the Western Wall. This is part of the archaeological park of Jerusalem. Those are some of the southern steps going up to the temple that Herod built. These rocks, which we just saw, are ones that were left there from, they say this is some of the ones that the Romans threw down in 70 AD. Jesus said they will not leave one stone upon another because you do not know the time of your visitation. That's when Jesus wept over Jerusalem during the triumphal entry, just a street.
So Jerusalem is like a maze with a roof, and there's sometimes opening spots, but you're just constantly going through these winding tunnels.
This is the Madaba map, this is a map of Jerusalem. This is the main drag, and this part here would have been the Damascus Gate, which I'll show you that part in a minute. This is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It does not include the Temple Mount, which would have been about right here. So they date this into the, 300 or 400s maybe. It was found, this is just a copy, but it was found on the floor of a church in the country of Jordan. And it's like a map of the whole world. But they say this is like a Christian artist's rendition because it's not geographically accurate. They put the Church of the Holy Sepulchre as the main thing of Jerusalem, and it's not in the center of Jerusalem, but it's just interesting to see. But so there's, again, this is just a part of Jerusalem. There's a whole map that includes kind of the rest of the known world at that time, so it's kind of cool. These are excavations. This was kind of underground, what they think a street might have looked like. This is an artist depiction. This is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So it's the feeling I had. I would think Jesus, if he walked into this place, would have had the same feeling as when he cleansed the temple. Okay, so there's the Stations of the Cross here, basically. This is supposedly the stone slab that they laid Jesus' body on, and that's what this mosaic here represents. So there's people going up to it and kissing it. They're laying their handkerchiefs on it and rubbing it. It's ridiculous. This, you can't see him, but there's a guy right here bending down, kissing something. That's supposedly where the cross was. And then you go down to where they laid his body at that stone slab. And then in this little thing is the supposed actual tomb. And there's people lined up all the way around this to go in and see it, which, that's fine, but they're also worshiping it as a shrine. Okay, this is that original Damascus Gate, they think, that would have been in that Madaba map that I showed you. So up where I'm standing, so we just came out, this is the Damascus Gate today. So we're going up to Golgotha, or a potential place of the skull. So you can kind of see here, maybe two eyes. Part of the rock had fallen off to where it looks like a skull. And so that's why they think, hey, maybe this was the place. But this was probably the most Christian place that it felt like in Jerusalem. There's a lady there who led the tour, but just very good, and just talking about the resurrection.
But I was really mad. This probably made me the most mad, because you go to this place, this lady's telling the gospel story, and she's like, this is where we think Jesus was crucified, and there's a parking lot that the Muslims own right there, and a mosque right beside it. And it's like, this could be such a cool place for people to come visit, and you're trying to envision, and there's all these buses, and it's just kind of bad. I took this picture. It's hard to see, but maybe those would have been the eyes. I don't know. It was obviously taken a long time ago when they started excavating it, but this is a tomb that's just on the other part of it, which they're not saying it is like other places are, but they're just saying, hey, this is potentially a place. So come and see the place where he lay. He's not here, and that's what it looked like inside. Okay, this is the Ecce Homo Arch. Okay, this is where they say Pilate, they brought Jesus out, and Pilate said, behold the man. This is around the pool of Bethesda. So this is actually, even that arch and this would have been in the Muslim quarter of Jerusalem. And this was all on our last day, and it was kind of rainy, so that was kind of a bummer. But this is St. Anne's Church, which is right behind me as I just took those other pictures. It was a Crusader age church. Now we're walking down into the Kidron Valley,
which that's what Jesus walked across when he went to the Garden of Gethsemane. So this gate, right behind this is the Temple Mount. This gate is enclosed right now. It's the Golden Gate. This is the Garden of Gethsemane. That's the gate right there that I just pointed to you. So what's interesting is if Jesus is praying here, most likely he's seeing the guards that are coming to arrest him come out of that gate on the Temple Mount, and he's watching them walk down the hill coming to the garden. Okay? When behind Jesus is just basically wilderness. So if you want a chance to get away, it was there. And this is a church that they built right there. It's kind of pretty on the outside, but we didn't go inside. This is the Valley of Hinnom, or Gehenna as well. It's kind of a sad note to end on, but I do it for a reason. They built the high places of Topheth, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire, which I did not command them, nor did it come into my mind. So this valley, there would have been a lot of evil things that happened down there. Okay? But one thing that's interesting to me, and stuck out to me, especially when I got back, is to contrast this Jerusalem versus the New Jerusalem. Because honestly, Jerusalem, I kind of felt Jerusalem was kind of ugly. Like Galilee was just beautiful. But when I got back, one of the things I read about was the New Jerusalem. And so I just want to close by, and then if we have time for questions, we can do that. But I hope you see a contrast. So then came one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues and spoke to me, saying, "Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great high mountain and showed me the holy city Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God. Its radiance like a most rare jewel, like jasper, clear as crystal. It had a great high wall with 12 gates. And at the gates 12 angels, and on the gates the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel were inscribed. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And the one who spoke with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city and its gates and walls. The city lies 4 square, its length the same as its width. And he measured the city with his rod, 12,000 stadia, which is almost 1,400 miles. Its length and width and height are equal. He also had measured its wall, 144 cubits by human measurements. 1 cubit is 18 inches, about, which is also an angel's measurement. The wall was built of jasper, like this, while the city was pure gold, like clear glass. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with every kind of jewel. The first was jasper, the second sapphire, the third agate, the fourth emerald, the fifth onyx, the sixth carnelian, the 7th chrysolite, the 8th beryl, the 9th topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. And the 12 gates were the 12 pearls, each of the gates made of a single pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass. And I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God the Almighty and the Lamb. And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine upon it, for the glory of God gives its light, and its lamp is the Lamb. By its light will the nations walk, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it, and its gates will never be shut by day, and there will be no more night there. They will bring into it the glory and the honor of the nations, but nothing unclean will ever enter it, nor anyone who does what is detestable or false, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb through the middle of the street of the city. Also on either side of the river, the tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. No longer will there be anything accursed, but the throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, and his servants will worship him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. And night will be no more. They will need no light of lamp or sun, for the Lord God will be their light, and they will reign forever and ever. So that's the contrast of Jerusalem now versus the Jerusalem to come is pretty significant. Any questions you would like to ask? Or something we can explain better?
Did you describe They have factories on the south side that they take the water and they have these huge places for makeup and cosmetics and stuff, and they're using a lot of it.
The very southern part, they take a lot of minerals out. But he still said it's really deep. I forget how deep he said it was, but like it's got a long ways to go. There's no reason to panic, I guess. This was like 250 slides, and I had to dwindle it down to.
I don't know, Brady took like 650 pictures.
Yeah, there's a lot of pictures to go through. I edited about 3 times.
So if it wasn't a relaxing trip necessarily, like we were busy and we walked so much every day, and we tried to take the stairs a lot because the elevators were slow. We had to deal with a lot of different groups of people from all nations were there, and they don't understand things like lines and waiting in line. And then we also had to deal with Jews on their Sabbath that had an elevator that stopped at every single floor, and they didn't want to touch you or be near you. We didn't get a chance to talk to any Jews because they don't look at you. They don't really want to talk to you. So we did talk to some Palestinians, some Christians at the shops. And you want to talk about the guy you met in Jericho?
Oh yeah, so at Jericho I met a guy named Assam. He was just one of the waiters where we had lunch. And I was just talking to him, and I asked if he was a Christian. At first he said no, but there was a ministry there called, you remember what it was called? Seeds of Hope? Is that what it was? But yeah, anyway, through that ministry, he has become a Christian, and but just his wife is not a Christian, but his kids do a lot with this ministry because they have like some daycare things. I think his wife might even work there or something, but again, he's just in a culture and a place where, you can't just be open about it. So he was really in Jerusalem. I did not see a religious Muslim at all. Even when you heard the call to prayer,
I thought that they would stop and bow, and everybody just kept walking. I was like, I kind of asked somebody later, or I don't remember who I was talking to, like, why didn't anybody stop? And they're like, they don't really care.
Yeah. So, like I said, the Orthodox Jews, they don't really pay attention to you. And a lot of the stuff that's considered Christian, I guess I would have a second opinion about. So, to me, it's just a lot of it's very shrines and things like that. So, yeah.
Yes, Father.
My going to Israel, did it with your studies at Nebraska Christian, all that, did it give a different look as you look at scriptures? Did it help?
Oh yeah, because now
people to go to it, even though you're disappointed in Nazareth, you're disappointed in commercialism.
I would just tell you places
just
to go.
Just don't go to those places. But yeah, definitely go. There's so much more to see. But it is neat to, when you read a passage, to get an idea. You get a real picture in your mind versus making it up. Like, if you've ever seen the movie Kingdom of Heaven, it's about the time of the Crusaders. There's a big battle scene in there, but there's this huge flat spot in the movie where they have this battle as they're sieging Jerusalem. Well, it's totally not. It doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah, I think it brings to life the story a lot more. So, like, when you imagine the shepherds out in the fields, you imagine Iowa fields, but like when you saw their rocky terrain and their little grasses growing on the side of the hills, you understand like where the shepherds were and what it looked like, and Jesus being born in a cave, which makes sense. I think it just brings it a lot more to life, for sure. I highly recommend it. They love Americans there. Our guide was very pro-Trump. Some people were not. But they love Americans. We went to a market. We went to this huge food market on our free day. I don't even know how many blocks it was. And there he's like, "You're from America?" And we're like, "Yeah." And he gave us more food. And we never felt scared at all, ever. It's amazing how the security is different in each country. I will say that. In Israel, the security is different than it was in Germany, than it was in America. I hated Germany's worse, probably. Because you had to go through a lot of
in Jerusalem, you had There were guys.
There's soldiers constantly all over
Yeah.
Jerusalem carrying the rifles, but they're really nice. They
Look
you.
they look professional too. They don't look like guys holding a sawed-off shotgun you see in the third world with standing in flip-flops or something.
So everybody there is required to do military service. One thing that happened when we were there, I guess, that there was some rockets shot off from Gaza. But we didn't really even know it, except Menachem, our guide, told us. And he's like, in school that there are these juveniles, and you kind of put them in the corner. You just kind of let them be. He's like, that's what the people at Gaza are. They're just the juveniles. Nobody likes them. They're just kind of there. We're going to leave them alone, let them do their own thing. Jerusalem, I think going from Galilee to Jerusalem was super intense because you were at this peaceful place, and then you go to Jerusalem, and it's insane. It's kind of intense. But we got to walk a lot of the streets, and yeah. Is there any other questions? I encourage you to go if you get a chance.
But we can't go right now. They
Go
closed
after the
they
virus.
closed everything down, which is significant for Israel because tourism is so much of their economy. And the tour guide said that, especially around Easter time, is the high point. So for them to shut all that down is pretty significant. So.
Okay. Thank you for coming.